Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Man, okay. All right, and let me see if this other thing that I did works. So I threw together
Gotcha.
a quick, I sent you the notes. Of course, I was thinking about it and I was like, well, if it's in my head, then I need to at least share it with you because that's not fair. So it doesn't mean we have to abide by that. I'm just throwing that in there. And then I also want to try this here while we're in here, is to, where the heck did it go?
So we've got topics and agenda.
Oh, cancel and add agenda. Okay, real conversations. There we go. So I just added a thing that's the agenda on the left. Can you see that? Does it show up for you?
Shows the title, time, transcript. I don't. Oh, yeah, it's on the bottom left.
It's a little thing that.
There we go. Yes, intro. Intro, right. Current events, topics, all-time evergreen topics. Okay.
Yeah, no, I just, what I did was I threw onto our little notepad that I sent you the little thing of, and I was like, actually, there's nothing wrong with you and I talking about the current events, for example, the NAR settlement, and there's nothing wrong with, because it does affect our customers, and there might be some things that we might want to share with what that means to our customers.
You know, Terry, it's you and I are always on the same page there, right? I mean, I was in my other office just a moment ago, and it occurred to me that whether we're talking about all of the changes that are coming down to NAR that are impacting agents, they're impacting buyers and sellers too. Everything that's coming down, anybody who wants to buy or sell a home, all the changes that are coming down are going to impact people. Negative or positive, I think that remains to be seen. Change isn't necessarily bad. So we just have to make the best of it, make sure we go in educated, and make sure that our customers, people we're working with, are educated. So it starts with us. You know, it starts with spending 2 hours in a meeting yesterday discussing all of the changes, everything that's coming down, and how we have to deal with it on black and white, right? Contracts, paper. But we have to have some conversations too. And, you know, one of the things I was thinking about is we're going to have some role playing. I think the next couple of weeks of Coffee with a Broker is going to be still on this topic, but we're going to move away from the black and white of it to how are the conversations going to go? Right? So what are the conversations we're going to be having with the seller? How are we going to be prepared to answer their questions, to address their concerns, and to make sure that buyer or seller, nobody is being left out in the cold or feeling taken advantage of? And that's our job. That's what we do.
So let's do something here before we get too deep into the conversation piece of this, because that's already good information. But for the sake of these recordings and what we're doing, first of all, I loosely titled this, which I don't think it's a bad title at all, Real Conversations with Terry and Allan.
Real, real.
And, you know, a little double meaning there, you know, real conversations, but also real estate, whatever, you know,
sure,
target, whether it be buyers and sellers or whether it be agents that we're talking about that day. But I think one of the things we need to do is we need to introduce ourselves so that people know who Allan is and what his place is, both for the company and as well as maybe some behind the scenes experience. And then also Terry too.
So with the introductions, is this something that we could we're not going to have to revisit this every week, right?
We might have a short introduction, but let's talk about a little bit about who we are and where we're coming from. And yes, we can package some of that up. That could be a type of intro, and then that way we can reuse that. But we may also just have a few seconds before we start, just to kind of say, hey, I'm this person and I'm this person, and then we
Sure.
start.
Yeah. So my name's Allan. I'm the co-broker here at Ameriteam Realty. I've been a broker now since 2020, and I came on board with Ameriteam back in 2017. So my life in my first 30 years was as an electrical engineer. So I'm very methodical in my thinking. I like to build products. That's what I've always done. I came into the second part of my life wanting to build a new business and not have to invent a market. And I thought, why? Well, real estate's always existing as a market. Now, it might be subject to change, but I don't have to create a house and sell a house and then recreate the house and create a new market and all that. Real estate market has been around for decades. It'll be around for decades to come. And I think that as long as we adapt and go with it, we'll be fine. So it's a great place to build a new business and to share my talents and to work with agents as well as customers. I do work with both, so it keeps me fresh and on top of things.
So a little bit about me. My name's Terry Barnett, and my official title here at Ameriteam is actually Director of Agent Support. But I'm also an active agent out in the field, actively working in real estate. So, and my experience goes back over 30 years at this point. And I have experience with real estate and my businesses and technology, investment side of real estate, as well as being an agent in real estate. And then I also have, as far as training experience, I spent almost 10 years training agents in our field for the multiple listing service. So that's just a little bit of background. Obviously, as we talk and we get into these conversations, we can get deeper into one area of our experience or not. But that just gives a little bit of background about who we are. Now, as far as personalities, and you can totally take this in a different direction, but like my impression, like whenever we have conversations, Allan, is that you tend to be an analytical mind, conversationally pretty laid back, calm, cool, and collected when you have conversations. I tend to be, and this is just my opinion, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, but I tend to be a little more and passionately intense whenever I'm bringing something up or I'm talking about something. Sometimes, depending on the situation, sometimes that can be taken the wrong way, etc. But it's always because I care and I'm passionate about the things I'm talking about. So in these conversations, if I come off a little strong or I come off a little passionate, it's just that's literally who I am. And
Sure.
yeah, and so and I think it actually meshes well whenever we have these conversations, because we both come at this with experience. We both come at this with some good thought, and we don't always agree on everything, which I think is a good place to be. Is that we can have a conversation. We know we're trying to get to the same place, and that whether if we're talking about buyers and sellers, it's because we want the buyers and sellers to win, and if we're talking about trying to dealing with something in the Ameriteam business itself with the agents, we're trying to find ways to help these agents be successful as well. So even if we disagree and we need to debate it out or talk it through or discuss it in a couple of different points of view, we know at the end of the day that we're actually trying to get to the same place.
Absolutely. And I think it's important people understand, our backgrounds, our paths met several years ago. So when I first came into real estate, Terry, you were my coach and trainer. So, I learned how to launch a career at the very beginning, starting with you. And it was interesting because, I've been in business before. And, I've always gone into business knowing what I was doing. And real estate was the first time as a brand new agent going into business, not knowing what the heck I was doing.
I actually remember that conversation. You
Yeah.
actually shared that in the room at our old office before we transferred to the new location.
I share it to a lot of people.
I remember you bringing up that conversation, that it was the first time that you had come into a business and been like, I feel like I'm brand new at this. It's fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
it is. And you know what? I think I look back on our partnership fondly, because even after you were my coach and trainer, we became business partners. And what I liked about our partnership is that, we were able to offset each other. You had, you've got a more dynamic, free-flowing, artistic personality. I love spreadsheets. And I do. I tend to, if I'm teaching a class or I'm talking to somebody, it's very conversational, but it's very, very right to the point. And that has its pluses and minuses. A lot of people like to get right down to business. Here's what I need. And a lot of people like to sit back, have a cup of coffee, get to know each other. And especially, when you're with people that just want to get to know who you are. So I've learned a lot becoming a real estate agent, coming from the engineering field and having to work directly with people face to face on a regular level. I work with customers. I work with agents. So I get a nice broad feel, as you do. We get a nice broad experience working with people and the directions they come from and the lives that they lead. And there's a lot of interesting people out there. That's part of what makes this job. I love it.
Absolutely. And one of the interesting dynamics, and thank you for telling the story of how we met and the dynamic of those things, and then we became business partners. And one of the things that's I think it's wonderful, because I love the dynamic of it, is that where I was your coach and trainer when you first started,
Mm-hmm.
you are now actually my boss in this position that we're in, and also my broker as an active agent for Ameriteam. And where they're, like some people may see that as like a challenge or something. Because I know how you work and I know how you think, I actually feel very confident when we have a conversation and I also realize I don't know everything, right? And you don't pretend to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
But with our experiences, when they come together, we actually end up with really good answers. And I know that whenever I ask you a question or I'm struggling with an answer, that I can actually come to you and we'll bounce things off of each other. The answer may come from you, it may come from me, but the conversation and the wisdom that is brought to the table, it makes me very confident. Like, I love having you as the broker of Ameriteam in order to, when something comes up. For example, we know, current events. We've got the NAR settlement that we're dealing with that, and some of the requirements for agents and some of the things that customers need to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I can trust that you've been on top of that, and the things that you're sharing back with us and our team and how we can help our customers and whatnot, that all of that you've got that covered. You've got us taken care of. And I'm confident that we are in good hands. So whenever you've been sharing those things with us, I'm like, I know you got that part, and that you're keeping an eye on it, and you're trying to do your best to have our back, as well as, of course, at the end of the day, we have to take care of the customer, because that's what all of this is, right?
Sure.
Why don't we use that segue? Why don't we use that segue? If you have something else, so by all means, stop me, go where you need to go with that. But why don't we go ahead and just talk about, maybe we just start with maybe some of the challenges that this is bringing up for customers, as far as this, when we say NAR settlement. Some customers know about it, some don't. But it's going to come up here and there. They're either going to hear something, see something in the news, see something posted online, or a friend is going to tell them something. And, just like, especially at first, the agents, there's all kinds of misinformation out there. The customers are going to be running into the same thing as all of this adjusts.
Well, let's face it. We're dealing with customers nowadays where so much information is, right at their fingertips. They get flash news in the morning coming up on their phones. A lot of people like me just like to read the headlines, and if they see something that piques their interest, they might deep dive. And if they're really interested, they'll read the whole article, or otherwise they'll figure, I got a gist of it. I get it. And so whether you're a buyer or you're a seller, if you're looking to sell your home, you're looking to buy your home, you know that, well, okay, something's happening in the market besides interest rates. Everybody knows the interest rates are impacting us all. And it's nice to hear that they're starting to come down a little bit. But okay, so what is all this NAR settlement stuff? What does it have to do with me, the consumer? And I think we have to, help people understand that for you, it's not going to change too much. So we're getting a lot of questions from sellers, right? An agent goes in, they're having the conversation, preparing to sell their home, and they're saying, hey, look, Bob, I just read an article recently. I don't have to offer a buyer broker commission. So what's that all about? Well, you have to be able to know your history and understand that. Let's talk about that. So let's just talk about that. Let's dive right in. I want a little history right here. So up until the 1990s, not the 1890s, which seems like it, right? Up until the 1990s, there was no such thing as a buyer broker. Everybody worked for the seller. And so if another broker happened to be working with somebody looking to buy that property, the buyer agent, we'll call them that because that's a term we have. It wasn't a term back then. Right. That agent working with that buyer would fall under the seller's agent, become a sub-agent. Everybody was working for the seller. And so the buyer would come in, the agents, all the agents are working for the seller, seller's paying, this, that, and the other, and the buyer would, buy the house. There was also a term back then called buyer beware. In other words, you didn't know what you were buying. There weren't things like full disclosure. There weren't things like, regular inspections and stuff like that. So, if you had a good agent, you would have home inspections, you would have it done. But for the most part, people would just go in uneducated, because we didn't have this at our fingertips either, and you'd end up buying a lemon. You get into a house, your roof's leaking, caused all kinds of legal problems. I bought my first home in the mid 1990s. And it was interesting because I didn't give it any thought then. I'm a young engineer buying my first home. Here I'm at. And he introduces me, gentleman's name is Slade, and says, hey, I'm a buyer's broker. I'm like, oh, good for you. I didn't know what that meant. But, all he said to me was, you don't have to pay me for my services. I get my service paid from the sale of the home. So he brought me into all kinds of homes in the whole area, and we finally landed on one and got under contract, and it was a good experience. It really was a good experience. And from that point on, I guess buyer brokers became more and more common. So a buyer now could work with an agent who was kind of looking out for their best interests to get them into get them into a home. And by the way, so I'm going to help you get into this home, and let's get an inspection done. And don't forget, you got to get your escrow in, you got to get your inspection done. I'm going to walk you through the whole process. And this became a thing. So a buyer could actually come alongside an agent who was looking out for their best interest. And what a wonderful thing. And that went until just a few years ago, when a seller all of a sudden came down and said, I just paid this chunk of money out of the sale of my house to this agent, and a chunk of that money went off to this guy who negotiated me down and who gave me a hard time through inspection and gave me all this hard time, and it started raising eyebrows. People didn't like that.
Yeah. So I want to insert a little bit of different points of view here. Mm-hmm. So I've been in this business for a long time, licensed in Kansas, and I think it is important that I talk about. We are actually Florida licensed agents, right? Sales associates, broker in Florida. So if somebody is actually buying a house in another state, some of what we may bring up may not be exactly the same in your state. So we are only licensed to be, basically giving the advice on Florida, on the
True
Florida
enough.
laws. Just wanted to bring that up. But the way I was always taught, and the way that and I believe that you would agree that the same way that you understood it was that the listing agent had arranged with the seller to pay them a certain amount. We don't have to discuss percentages or whatnot, but the idea was if there was only one agent involved, in other words, a buyer came straight to that listing agent, then that listing agent may get the whole thing. But a lot of times, and more often than not, there were usually two agents involved in a transaction. There was one that listed the house and marketed it from that standpoint. And then there was another agent that you were trying to attract. They had the buyer and you were trying to attract them. And so the way I was always understanding how the commission worked, and this is the way it was taught to me, this is the way it was written out in most trainings and presentations, and the way that we presented it whenever we were having the listing agreement signed was, okay, I charge us this much to list your home, market it, and get it sold for you, right? And then and I'm going to use part of that to attract the buyer through other agents. There's hundreds of thousands of agents out there, and I'm going to use a part of that as the marketing portion of the commission. Yes, I'm going to use some of it to create photos, virtual tour, these kind of things, but I'm also going to use part of it to attract that other agent to bring a buyer into this position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that portion at closing and I'm going to give it to that other side, that agent, to make sure that they're paid, because that's what we were using to attract them. Exactly. And so I think it's important that whether we're talking to agents to talk about the past, or we're talking about customers, the consumer, buyer and seller, that they understand, look, you were never paying the buyer's agent from our perspective. You were always paying the listing broker, right? And then that person was sharing their commission. Now, yes, there are two agents getting paid, but part of it was to attract that other person. So what's happened, and correct, by all means, correct me if you feel differently on any of this. What's happened is communicating the way that was got misconstrued at some point and separated to where the sellers, especially in these areas where this started at, where they felt like the seller was the one paying that. And if you want to come at things in that direction, no, the buyer's the one paying for everything because they're the one coming to the transaction with the money. The seller didn't have any of the money. The buyer brought it to begin with. So it's all a point of perspective, right? That's right. But this NAR settlement is about separating those two into two halves. Yep. And full disclosure, it can still work the way that it did. And we can talk about that. It can still work the way it always has. But now this NAR settlement has forced other choices to be more apparent. Would you say that? Because all these choices were always there. I mean, I don't think there's anything that ever said that a seller couldn't pay a buyer's agent directly, or that the buyer couldn't pay their agent.
Sure. And when you look at, when you stand back and you look at the big picture and you understand that what the government, DOJ, what they're trying to do is to make sure that when parties go into a contract, that there are no surprises. You do not want the seller going, I didn't know part of my 5 or 6% or whatever you negotiated was going to that guy. I didn't know part of it was going to that. Well, it's here in the contract. Here's the cooperative section. At least it is in Florida. And you're right. I don't know what it is. I know we've got somebody up in Maryland that we work with. Their sales contracts are like 28 pages long. Ours are 13. They're half the size, right? Mm-hmm. So, and how many buyers or sellers will just, you're having a conversation and you're my friend and I get to know you. I trust you. I've just sign, click, click, click. I'm all signed. It's all signed in initial. Great. But that's true. And it wasn't argued that way either. It was never presented. So somewhere along the line in the narrative in other markets, never seen that here in Florida, never taught it other than what you just described. You're going to pay me 6% per the contract. Out of that 6, I'm paying all this other stuff. I'm going to get a professional photographer coming in. I got my licenses and taxes and all that stuff I pay. And by the way, I'm going to take a chunk of that and offer it as an incentive. It's all marketing dollars. What you're doing is you're asking a seller to pay you marketing dollars. For those marketing dollars, these are all the things I'm going to do for you. We're going to do open houses for you. We're going to get it on the MLS for you. We're going to get it syndicated out in realtor.com and Zillow and all the other places for you, so that we're going to give you the best opportunity. But the best opportunity, because those are passive, the best opportunity is when you have part of those marketing dollars as an incentive, because a lot of people don't understand the MLS. The MLS is our warehouse. So I'm working with a buyer and I'm in the warehouse going, ooh, my buyer wants this type of house. And I'm going to look in that warehouse to find all the houses that match what he's looking for. I am actively searching, pulling lists, presenting it to my buyer, who, by the way, I just spent the last week getting pre-qualified for a loan, so that we know what they can afford. We know how they can get into it. It's like, this is what we're going to do. And these are the houses. This is the area that we're looking at. These are all the things that we've discussed. Here's your homes. We narrow it down to their top 3 to 5 and start, hey, let's go visit them. And so we've done all this legwork, all this footwork. And oh, by the way, I have to pay my taxes. I have to pay for my tools and my fees and all those things too. And so I just found a home for you. And out of this home, they're paying, they're giving concessions. So some sellers will offer money toward closing costs and prepaids. And by the way, yes, I am getting paid from those dollars for my commission for all the work I just helped you with. Now, there is going to be a slight change to that going forward. And
can you hold that thought for just a moment?
Yes.
I definitely want you to talk about that change. I want to magnify the way it was a few days ago and the way it's going to change. Okay, so from a buyer's perspective, because that's kind of what you just brought up.
Exactly.
Buyers are used to not having to sign any paperwork. I'll let you handle that part. But buyers are used to, it's not going to cost me anything, even though it is, they actually brought the money. But that in their mind, it doesn't matter, because they really don't have to worry about how much or little you worked. They don't have to worry about, as long as they think that you're going to give them access to the house that they want to look at, etc. All of that's okay, because really, it's going to be paid by the seller. And of course, some agents presented it that way. I'm not going to cost you anything. It's all right. I get that from the seller. Which you said that earlier. That's one of those big things that's going to be changing, is not only do we have some clarification on that on the seller's end, but the buyers are going to be in for a big surprise and a change. I think this is going to be one of the biggest, like, bam, like, what that all of us are going to be having to deal with, and we're going to have to be coming up with some good ways to communicate this change, is that these buyers aren't even going to be able to look at a house unless they sign a piece of paper.
That's right. And it won't matter what brokerage they go with. It won't matter who they sign with, per regulations. And it's not signed into law yet. What I mean by that is the Department of Justice has received an agreement. This is our proposal from the National Association of Realtors. These are the things that we want to do to make it better, plus pay $418 million. So with all of that, even though the DOJ hasn't said yes and slammed the gavel down and we've accepted this, the rules have come down through. And so what they're doing is they're enforcing these rules through fines and penalties against the agent if they don't follow through with them, that before an agent shows a house, the buyer is going to have to now sign a contract. The contracts vary from 1 page to 3 pages. Some are more detailed than others, but basically what it's going to come down to is the buyer has to understand that they may come across a home where the seller's not offering any concessions whatsoever, and they've opted out of any concessions toward a buyer broker. And so the buyer themselves may actually be responsible for their agent's compensation. That's what's new. That's the big one. Now, I don't see a lot of sellers right now. The statistics coming down is like over 95% of the sellers aren't changing the way they do things. They like the way it worked. It was fine. It's that extra 5% that say, you know what? I'm not going to pay a buyer's broker. And so in those instances, an agent will have to get paid directly from the buyer under the contract that they will be required to sign. Now, key thing, all buyers should be understanding, everything's negotiable. The other part of the lawsuits that have been going on, especially the Burnett Sitzer lawsuit, you can Google that, and it will show you that was against antitrust. Those were the accusation, and the understanding were there were large brokerages out there that were hammering 6% into their agents, and there were a lot of sellers out there going, I didn't know I had the option to sell for less than 6%. And you know something, when I bought my first house in the 1990s and I paid $85,000 for my very first house at 6%, you're not talking about a huge chunk of dough. Vacant land is going for that now here in Florida. So now you're talking about 6% of a $500,000 home. Let's face it, median home prices aren't $250,000 to $300,000 anymore. They're $350,000 to $400,000. So now you've got the prices that have gone up, but the percentages haven't gone down. And so you're talking about big chunks of money, and that really upsets people. So there is room for negotiation for the buyers, there's room for negotiation for the sellers, so that everybody has a clear understanding that says, yeah, I'll sign this piece of paper, but on my terms, on the buyer's terms, on the seller's terms. I want control. And really, when you look at all of this, that's what it comes down to. Giving control and educating the buyer and the seller to understand what their options are and what their responsibilities are and what their potential liabilities will be.
So I'm gonna touch on a couple of things here. I'm gonna backtrack and then I'm gonna go forward. But I'm gonna talk about commissions here real quick. So you brought up, thankfully, I appreciate this. You brought up the fact that commissions are and have always been negotiable. Okay?
Yes.
Now that doesn't mean that the customer gets to tell me what I charge, because it's negotiable between me and them.
Correct.
So that being said, and the number 6% gets thrown around a lot. That's because that's an average. But I've been in this for a long time, and I know for a fact that there have been 7% periods of time. There have been 5% periods of time, 6 obviously. I also know agents that started at 8 with their commissions. Here's what I would say. The agent that you choose needs to show their value to you. You need to understand and feel that agent is going to provide you with value. And then that trade-off, you need to feel good about that value that you're getting. I would be scared to pick an agent simply on the percentage that they're going to use to win my business. If somebody came to me with some low percentage and it was just lower than the other guy, to me that would be frightening, because basically the person that I'm choosing because they have a lower commission is the same person that I'm hoping is going to help me with negotiating on my biggest asset. To me, that sounds like a very dangerous game. So I would say choose an agent by skill, the way you trust them, the value that they present to you, and then negotiate a fair amount that you both sides feel good about. So none of the agents are actually, they can set their own price and negotiate from there. But there is no industry choosing what the amount that agents are going to charge us. That's one of the things that are supposed to be getting clarified by this adjustment is hey, it's negotiable, right?
Sure.
Well, it's negotiable, but it also doesn't mean that somebody gets to set my price for my services. And I say the individual. So that was something I wanted to bring up. You brought up how buyers, agents are trying to look in the MLS for their buyer finding a property. Oh, they want a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square foot with a pool over in such and such area of Florida. Well, before, the agent, so the buyer's side agent, would be able to go into the MLS. They do their search for the properties, much more detailed search than you have out on the Zillows and these sites that are out there on the web that are free. Free doesn't mean free. You're trading your content, your information, your personal information. You're trading that for that free, because the Zillows and websites like that, they take your information, they sell it to agents, to people like us, right? So they go and they sell that to agents. That was the free part, is they just sold you. Now you're gonna have a bunch of people calling you and trying to get your business. But the reason I brought that up was because previously, where we had it set up where it was almost always that the seller was paying that to the listing agent, and the listing agent was sharing their part of the commission. It was called a co-op, sharing part of the commission with that buyer side agent. The buyers would go in and they'd be looking for properties, and they could actually know that they were going to get paid because it was in the MLS. It would say 3%, 2%, 2.5%, 3.5%. It would say in there what they were going to get paid. So the buyer side agent had a pretty good chance of knowing that they were going to get paid at the end of this transaction.
Right.
One of the crazy things that came out of this, and I still believe this is just crazy that they did this, was they took the ability for us to communicate with each other that, hey, bring us a buyer and you're going to get paid. I think that takes a little bit of the power away from the sellers. Now, that's my opinion, but it's also 30 years worth of experience that says that system worked in attracting buyers for the sellers, right? And so that's one of the things that the buyers need to know. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a slight difference in that. Yes, you're right, but the other side of that coin was that an agent might look at 6 homes. I got 6 homes that match pretty closely. These are the ones I want to show my customer. These homes, oh, look, this one's offering 3% commission to the buyer broker, 3, 2, 2.5. So I'm going to focus on selling these 3 homes and drop the other 2 out. Yeah. Now you've just cut. Now, right? It's unethical to do that.
Right.
But agents do it. We know agents do it. Because the 2.5s will stay on the market a lot longer than the 3s. And so what they've done is they've taken that out. Now, what a seller can do now is they're saying they're putting it in like a lump. So a seller can now say, hey, I'm offering concessions in the amount of a percentage or a dollar sign. So you'll be able to see that. The key thing though is it's not that part is negotiable too. So the buyer who receives those concessions can choose what they want to do with those concessions. A buyer can see, oh, I see this seller's willing to pay 4% in concessions. Well, the buyer can say, I want to use that 4% toward my closing costs and prepaids. Or, I'm willing to take 4%. I'm going to give 2 to my agent, the guy who helped me out, the agent who helped me out for all of this. And I'm going to take 2 and help me out with the closing costs. That's the difference. So it'll still be kind of out there. In other words, hey, sellers offering concessions. They're just not defined. They're negotiable. Now, an agent will be required to call the listing agent, buyer calling the listing agent, to get more concise, information. How is that offered? Because the listing contract will have, hey, we're offering this and we're offering this. We're willing to pay this amount toward the broker, toward the buyer broker, and there'll be another form that they'll have to sign along with that. And so agents are forbidden. Different, yes.
Agents are forbidden to communicate the co-op commission in the MLS or any website like the MLS. So if somebody were to come out with a different website tomorrow and call it something else other than MLS, it's still not allowed. You can't do anything like the MLS either.
Actually, if we have a personal, like, so for instance, if our brokers decided to have its own website for its own listings, and our brokerage has anywhere from 80 to 100 listings on any given time, right? Variations from land to rentals to single family homes, some commercial. We're allowed to put those on our website, and we can put price and commission and all of that, anything we want. It's the other parts that we can't utilize the MLS, which is public data, for that. Terry, your screen just went blank.
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah. So the difference in that, just to clarify for anybody who's trying to capture or figure out the difference between the two things that we just said there, the difference is that Allan was referring to the brokerage is a separate entity from another brokerage. Okay, so ABC Realty and Ameriteam Realty can have their own websites that communicate commissions, but they can't get together and create a cooperative website to share and decide we are going to share commissions this way.
Correct.
It's the kind of a little bit of a disconnecting of the ability for agents to share those commissions back and forth and communicate the sharing of those commissions back and forth. So there's good and bad. It definitely throws things off a little bit. I'm going to pop out and pop back in real quick, just so my video shows back up.
Okay.
All right.
Here we go.
Yeah. Don't know what that was really about, but whatever.
Technical difficulties, right? Yeah. Story of our lives.
So and we could probably speak for
hours.
I was going to say at least another hour, but we could probably do an hour on the buyer side, an hour on the seller side. But I think we did a decent job of tackling a piece of this today. And
you know what? If we had to finish with anything,
good,
I would say this: for sellers and for buyers. I know, so knowledge is power, right? And sometimes, we get a little bit fear of the things that we don't know about. So this is going to be a key factor. If you're talking to your realtor about this and they stammer and stutter and they don't know what they're talking about, that's probably a good sign that you might want to choose a different realtor.
I love it.
And, and I've heard as a broker, I hate hearing these stories about, I interview realtors every day and they just choose to become a realtor because the one they had was so bad. And I think this is going to weed out a lot of those because, we need to be able to sit tall in our chair and be knowledgeable and be able to portray that we know what we're doing so that our customers, whether we're helping to sell their home or buy their home, can feel confident that we're going to do right by them all the way down the line. And so the value will be there. Just make sure you're educated as consumers are these days.
Yeah, it's important to know or to feel that the agent that is supposed to be working for you, and they will officially be doing that, right? Because you're going to be signing a paper to that fact. That they're actually providing you with not just experience, but also up-to-date knowledge. And just to tell you how big of a difference there are in companies that are staying on top of this stuff and are aware of this. Allan, could you tell the story? There was an agent that we just brought on.
Oh, we had an agent. Yes. So we brought on Ted. Ted's an experienced agent. As a matter of fact, he's a broker, just moved to Florida. He's been doing real estate almost as long as you have, Terry, and you've been you're up over 30 years. So I think you guys were comparing notes.
He literally was just 2 years short of my whole real estate experience. Yes.
But he had, I asked him how many other agencies he had interviewed with, and he said it was like 14 or 15. I can't remember the exact number. He didn't mention any names, but he did say that they all had their head in the sand.
As far as
they weren't prepared for what's going on. So, agents can't afford to make mistakes because there'll be fines, and they can't afford to make mistakes because we can't be hurting our customers. And it's going to be really important that that consumers, buyers and sellers, understand at the very least that they need an agent who understands what's going on, and to make sure those contracts are written right, to make sure that when you're under contract, that all of the 100 pieces that all have to fall together in order to get to signing at the end of your 30 or 45 days or whatever you've contracted under, that you have somebody that's going to be capable of handling that. And so it's just continuing to educate yourselves as consumers to understand what questions to ask of your agents. And if you don't feel comfortable with your agent now, and I'll put this out there too, we want to help our nieces and nephews and friends, and my buddy from school just got his real estate license, and
I was trying to do them a favor.
Yeah, well, you're doing somebody a favor could cost a buyer or seller thousands of dollars, and I see it. I've seen it happen all the time. It's when you think of the purchase or the sale of a home, it's for most people, it is the largest. It's the largest expense. It's the largest investment that they'll ever have to deal with. We're not talking about, a stock portfolio with a few $100,000 in it or something like that. We're talking about $500,000 homes. The average home price right now is hovering right around $400,000. Do you want to give responsibility to that to somebody who just had their real estate license, last week? Now, if you do work with a realtor who's brand new, make sure they have a good team. Make sure they have good leadership. Make sure they have good people that they can lean on. I don't have a problem. We hire new agents all the time, but we coach them, we train them, we walk alongside them. We do everything possible to ensure that they're dynamic, strong, good agents that are reliable, knowledgeable, and can do the best job for all of our customers. So there you have it. Terry, we could talk for hours. We know that, but people don't want to listen to us for hours. So,
well, I think this was a good stopping point. This is a good conversation today. We stayed primarily down, one topic, and that's perfectly fine. And of course, we'll be having more of these. So, as we put this out, whether it's short form videos or a long form video where everybody hears the entire presentation, we'll continue to do these and try to tackle both current events and as well as things that buyers and sellers are always having challenges with. And
right.
We'll keep coming back with relevant material. And and of course, if you don't have somebody that you like, love, and trust as your agent, you can always reach out to us, and we'll set you up with a knowledgeable agent. But even if you don't choose us, make sure you choose somebody that's going to make sure they take care of you, that they are knowledgeable and experienced, and that they have a team behind them that is going to be there for you when necessary.
Exactly. All right.
All right,
Terry.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.